I was thinking about our last project, and I believe we found some interesting insights.
Absolutely. The data suggested a few key areas for improvement that we should explore further.
First, we add sodium hydroxide to this solution. Then we will add hydrochloric acid to the solution and stir.
So, about that new project, I had a few ideas.
Oh, do tell. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
We need to prepare for the festival.
Yeah, I can help with the decorations.
That would be wonderful.
So, this is how it works. You press this button here.
Oh, I see. And then what happens?
It feels like a dream, being here with you.
I know, my dear. I've missed these moments.
The morning broke under a sky swollen with gray clouds, heavy and oppressive, as if the heavens themselves carried the same weight that pressed down on the wooden factory. Din sat in his office, the papers before him painted in sharp red numbers that cut into his heart like knives. Outside, the rain pounded against the tin roof, every drop a merciless reminder that shipments of new timber were blocked, trapped by the storm and by the soaring prices in the market. The storage yard lay almost bare, the last planks stacked in silence like exhausted soldiers after a long and bitter war. Din rubbed his temples, breath shallow, his mind circling the same desperate question: how can I keep 100 workers from being sent home empty-handed? He thought back to the days of plenty, when trucks carrying timber rumbled in and out without pause, when the sound of saws blended with the laughter of workers, when the whole factory blazed with the vitality of fresh wood. But those days were gone. Now the saws screamed only in scattered bursts, the rhythm of labor broken, replaced by anxious glances cast toward him. The leader, the one expected to find a way through the storm. Outside, the road to the factory dissolved into mud, every puddle like a hungry pit, ready to swallow hope. On the markets, the price of wood climbed higher each day, like cliffs that no man could scale. Then, in the midst of this suffocating gloom, a name arrived: Nuong. The man appeared like a gust of wind carrying news so sudden that Din's heart faltered. His voice was calm but firm as he spoke. He had 50 tons of timber for sale, 30 tons of acacia, 20 tons of pine, left stranded after a Thai buyer had canceled the contract at the last moment. The words struck Din like lightning through the storm, igniting his chest with a flare of light. He sat upright, eyes wide, every nerve in his body taut as a string about to sing. The news crashed over him like a tidal wave of relief. 50 tons. Such a number was no less than a life raft tossed into a raging sea. In his mind, he saw again the trucks rolling into the yard, the mountains of timber rising tall, the machines roaring back to life, the workers shouting to one another as they carved new futures out of wood. A whole machine that had been groaning toward its death could now be revived. Din leapt up, seized Nuong's hand in a grip, trembling with gratitude, words of thanks tumbling in his throat but drowned by the pounding of his heart. They exchanged phone numbers, firm voices setting tomorrow as the day Din would travel to Bin Kim to see the timber for himself. In Din's eyes, a fire blazed like a torch, newly fueled with oil. Outside, the rain still poured, but inside his chest the sun broke through, a golden warmth spreading through the cracks of despair. He He whispered to himself, half in disbelief, "Heaven hasn't abandoned me after all." For the first time in many weeks, his shoulders felt light. And yet, as the joy surged, a thin blade of suspicion cut through. In a market so starved that even scraps of timber were treated like gold, how could a man be left with 50 tons unsold? The question crept into Din's mind like a needle of ice. His brows furrowed, his pulse slowed, the taste of unease bitter on his tongue. Was this truly fortune's gift, or a snare disguised in sweetness? After Nguyen departed, Din remained seated, staring at the empty yard beyond his window. The storm's shadows pressed close, whispering of danger. He thought of stories, merchants ruined by deals too good to be true, fortunes crumbled in a heartbeat because of trust too easily given. Fear wound itself around him, dragging him back to the ground. His fingers closed around his phone, knuckles white, and a voice within him growled, "Do not be reckless. Do not be blinded by the shine of easy salvation." That night, the rain continued to fall, not as water, but as countless knives hammering the roof. Din lay awake, his mind a battlefield of hope and doubt. He thought of the workers who looked to him, of families whose meals depended on his decision, of the fragile future of his factory. One mistake, one careless choice, could turn all of it to dust. And so he swore to himself, "Tomorrow, I will see it with my own eyes. I will touch the timber with my own hands. Only then will I know what is real and what is false." The hours crept by, the storm outside merging with the storm within. Din sat by the window long into the night, listening to the wind howl as if the world itself warned him of the price of folly. He imagined the factory breathing faintly, machines sleeping, waiting to be woken. He pressed his trembling hand against the table, feeling the beat of his own pulse as if it were the heart of the entire company. And he knew this was not only about buying wood, it was about keeping that heart alive, refusing to let it stop beating no matter the storm. The house where Diep lived stood modestly at the edge of the village, its walls worn but steadfast, its roof patched with care. Inside dwelled an elderly couple who had taken her in, a man whose legs had grown stiff from years of labor in the fields, and a woman whose voice, though cracked with age, carried warmth enough to soften any wound. Diep tended to them with devotion, her hands quick, her eyes gentle. Each day she rose before dawn, swept the courtyard, prepared meals, and saw to every need. To her, they were not merely elders, but anchors, the family she clung to in a world that often felt cruel. When the old man's knee gave way one morning in the fields, she rushed into the forest, searching among damp leaves and twisted roots for herbs that might soothe his pain. The trees seemed to lean toward her as she searched, whispering encouragement through their rustling leaves. It was on one of those days, when the sky was heavy with dusk, that danger came. The knock on the wooden door was sharp, unnatural, and when the old woman opened it, men in uniform stood waiting. Their faces bore sternness. Their eyes gleamed with something less than honesty. They claimed to be police, their voices cold as steel, and they demanded Diep. "She is a fugitive," one declared, his words slicing the quiet air. The old woman stiffened, her knotted hands gripping the doorframe. Behind her, Diep froze, her heart slamming against her ribs like a trapped bird. The men pressed forward, their boots scuffing the threshold, their questions pointed and unrelenting. The old man, though crippled by pain, dragged himself to the doorway, defiance burning in his tired eyes. "Show your papers," he demanded, his voice a growl forged from years of endurance. The air thickened, silence stretching taut as a bowstring. The leader of the intruders hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing his face. The old woman stepped closer, her voice sharp and unwavering. "Real officers carry proof. If you have none, you are nothing but liars." Her words struck like thunder, rattling the brittle mask of authority. The impostors exchanged glances, their false bravado crumbling. One shifted his weight, Another glanced toward the darkening road outside. Their silence betrayed them, and the man who had stood by the family all this time, a neighbor stout and steady, stepped forward. His voice rang with conviction, cutting through their lies. These are no policemen. They are scavengers wearing stolen skins. The truth landed with the weight of a hammer. The men faltered, muttered curses, and within moments turned away, retreating into the shadows from which they had crawled. When the last echo of their footsteps faded, the house seemed to exhale. Diep sank to her knees, her chest heaving, tears burning behind her eyes. The old woman laid a trembling hand on her shoulder, whispering, "You are safe, child. You are safe." The old man, though weakened, straightened his spine, his gaze fierce with pride. The walls of the house, thin and humble, had withstood the storm. They had faced deception head-on and emerged unbroken. But in the silence that followed, Diep felt the weight of the encounter press deep into her bones. Danger had found her, and it would not be the last time. That night she lay awake, the memory of the uniforms lingering like a stain. Her mind replayed the sharp knocks, the false voices, the burning suspicion in their eyes. She thought of how quickly safety could shatter, how fragile the peace she tried to build truly was. Yet in that same darkness, she remembered the courage of the couple, the neighbor's bold voice, the way truth had shone brighter than fear. She whispered into the stillness that she would not run. She would not be broken. The storm had tested her, and she had learned that even the smallest flame of defiance could drive shadows away. By dawn, the world seemed to have shifted. The old woman hummed while cooking. The old man leaned on his cane with renewed dignity, and Diep moved through the house with steady steps. She prepared porridge, folded clothes, and checked the herbal poultice on the old man's knee. The rhythm of daily life returned, each task a quiet act of resilience. Yet beneath it all, the memory of the impostors coiled like a serpent, reminding her that peace must be guarded, that trust must be earned. She knew the world beyond their gate could be treacherous, but inside these walls, there was strength, love, and an unyielding bond. And so Diep carried on, her spirit tempered by fire, her resolve sharper than ever. She cared for the couple not only with duty, but with gratitude, for they had shielded her when danger knocked. Each smile they shared, each meal they ate together, became proof that even in a world riddled with deceit, truth could survive, love could endure. The house, battered yet steadfast, stood as their witness, and as the sun rose higher, breaking through the remnants of night, Diep whispered to herself, "No matter what comes, I will endure. I will not be lost." The morning rain had softened into mist when Din set out on the road, his thoughts heavy with timber and contracts, numbers that weighed more than stone. The world outside blurred through his windshield, fields bending under the weight of storm water, trees dripping like tired sentinels. It was then, through the silver haze, that he saw her, Diep, walking along the roadside, her arms cradling a bundle of herbs gathered from the forest. She walked with quiet determination, each step deliberate, as though the earth itself parted to let her pass. Din slowed, pulled his vehicle beside her, and stepped out. Their eyes met, and for a moment the storm seemed to still. He offered her a seat, but she shook her head gently, preferring to walk. So he matched her pace, the two of them moving side by side down the muddy road. Conversation came slowly at first, like drops of water falling from the eaves, but soon the rhythm steadied. They spoke of the herbs in her hands, of the old man's pain, of the night when danger had knocked at her door. Din listened intently, the echo of her courage stirring something fierce in his chest. He told her she was braver than many men he had known, and she only smiled faintly, as though courage was not a choice, but a duty. When they reached a small roadside stall, its roof patched with tin and its benches worn smooth by countless travelers, Din suggested they stop. The air inside smelled of tea leaves and damp earth. They sat across from each other, cups warm between their hands, the mist curling around them like a shroud, Din spoke then, words spilling like a flood long held back. He told her of the factory, of empty yards and silent saws, of the sudden hope that Nuong's offer had brought, and of the shadows of doubt that still clung to him. His voice cracked at times, the weight of responsibility pressing down, but he did not hide. He laid bare the truth, that he was afraid, but he could not afford to falter. Diep listened quietly, her gaze steady, her presence like a lamp in the fog. She told him that storms came and went, that even the strongest floods receded, but what mattered was the root, the will to stand firm when everything else bent. Her words slipped into him like fire into dry wood, kindling strength where fear had lingered. He thanked her, not just for her comfort, but for being there, for walking beside him when the road felt endless. She said little in return, only that she believed in him, and in that belief lay more power than any fortune could give. They spoke of other things then, of memories tucked away in quieter times. Din recalled their old farm, the fields golden in summer, the laughter that had once filled the air, and the dog named Hockey who had bounded through those days with joy unbroken. For a while they let the past wash over them, bitter sweet and warm, a reminder that even in hardship there had once been happiness, and perhaps there could be again. Din's eyes shone with determination as he said he would not allow the present storm to erase the future. He swore he would fight for the factory, for the workers, for every soul who depended on him. When the cups were emptied and silence fell between them, Din rose, offering to take her home. She accepted this time, climbing into his vehicle, the herbs resting carefully in her lap. The road wound back through the mist, and neither spoke much, yet the quiet was not heavy. It was filled with an unspoken bond, with the rhythm of hearts that beat in unison against the trials that lay ahead. When they reached her house, she turned to him, her smile small but true. "Rest," she said softly. "Even iron bends if pressed too long." He nodded, promising he would. Inside, the house glowed with the smell of rice cooking, the clatter of pots, the hum of evening routines. Diep moved swiftly, her hands busy as she prepared dinner. She placed the herbs over the fire, ground them into poultice, and carefully bound the old man's aching leg. His face twisted with pain, but his eyes glimmered with gratitude. "You are the daughter we never had," he murmured, and Diep's throat tightened. She smiled, pressing his hand gently, though her heart swelled with unshed tears. Later, as the meal simmered, she slipped away for a moment to call Din. Her voice was soft over the crackling line, asking if he had returned safely, if he had rested. He assured her he had, though his tone carried fatigue, and she reminded him again to take care of himself. There was silence, filled with unspoken words neither dared yet to say, and then she hung up, her chest lighter. The old woman's voice called her back into the room, urging her to sit, to eat. The table was simple, bowls of rice, vegetables, broth steaming with humble fragrance. Yet when they all gathered, Diep, the old man, the old woman, the room seemed to shine. They spoke of small things, of the weather, of neighbors, of old stories that still made them laugh. And though the world outside rumbled with uncertainty, inside there was warmth, safety, and the fragile beauty of belonging. Diep looked around the table, her heart aching with gratitude. She had almost been taken, almost been torn from this home by shadows in false uniforms. Yet here she was, sharing food, sharing laughter, sharing life. She thought of Din, fighting for his factory, carrying burdens no one else could bear. She whispered silently into the night that she would stand by him, just as he had stood by her. The meal ended, and the house grew quiet, but the warmth lingered. The storm might rage again, dangers might return, but for now, there was peace. Diep laid her head down that night with a heart steady and strong, the echo of Din's vow still ringing in her ears. She believed him. She believed in him. And belief, she knew, was the seed from which miracles grew.